Pete, we're ready to have you take it away.
Well, Mark, I sure appreciate you putting this opportunity together and your faithfulness. You've been doing this for years, and we've got some solid Republicans in both the Senate and in the House as a result of your work.
Well, I think it's not mine, but it's the people that, and this is only a small fraction. We're a group right now. Our membership is about 127.
Yes.
And so this is what
yes.
Some of them come from a distance.
And then your pro-life work has just been stalwart. I mean, that's where I really met you.
Yeah,
that's where we got to know each other probably 25 years ago. Yeah. And he's been on the forefront of the pro-life cause for years, and I certainly appreciate that. Many of you probably have. I recognize many of your faces, and I appreciate you being here. Probably what I have to share today is not going to be all that new, but hopefully, if you want a copy of my presentation, I'll be glad to send it to you via email or CD. You're welcome to come by the house. I've given you a little response slip. If you're interested in being on my email newsletter, e-newsletter, I'd certainly ask you to give me your email address. And if you're willing to help my campaign in any way, then I'm certainly here asking that you'd help my campaign. Whether it's just coming to the office and doing some administrative stuff, making a phone call, you have opportunities on that checklist. Or if you're just willing to help somebody else out, let me know. We'll try to find out who your state rep is, state senator, and we'll try to get you connected. Basically, there's some great things happening in Kansas, and you're not going to see it in the media, right? There's some incredible things happening. When you take a look at Kansas, our three primary producers are aircraft industry, which is in the tank, our ag industry, which is in the tank, and our oil and gas, which is in the tank. And so our three primary drivers of our economy are still struggling. And yet, you know what? We got more employees working today than we've ever had in Kansas. We got more employers in Kansas than we've ever had. We got more companies. We got people moving for the first time in history. I mean, not history, in the last 10, 15 years. But in my recent history, we got people actually moving into Kansas. For years, people are migrating away from Kansas. They're actually coming. We got companies that are coming to Kansas, a number of them, which I could get into. I don't have time tonight. But Kansas has been ranked 5th best, most friendliest state in the nation. 5th best for business friendliness. If you're a female and you want to own a business, this is one of the best places to start up a business if you're a female. Kansas, right here, according to this report. And yeah, Kansas has outstripped our region in the 3rd quarter of 2015. That's the most data we have. Bottom line, we've got some great things happening. New jobs, and just in Sedgwick County alone, 6,000 new jobs, according to the Labor Department. So when we start looking at what's going on in Kansas, we've got some great things going on, including workman comp reform for our businesses. A number of things. We've done 100% reimbursement immediately in the first year on your tax return. And by the way, yes, if you actually produce a profit as a sole proprietor, as an S-corp, right, as an LLC, you get to keep that. We're trying to get everybody, drive everybody to zero. And so we dropped about 300,000 folks on the bottom side by raising the personal exemptions. Guess what? They don't even come up. They don't have to pay taxes at all. 330,000 folks not paying taxes today on the bottom side. Then we've got the folks on the top. But what about the guys in the middle? We had 3 tax brackets, went to 2, and lowered their rates as well. Our goal is to get everybody to zero. So people say, well, why the business guys? They can afford it. Well, the reality is some of them can't. They take a lot of risks. Some of them make money this year, lose money the next. Bottom line, we said if we're going to stimulate the economy, what do we want? We want to bring another Spirit in, another Boeing? Well, that'd be nice. But it's hard to attract those kinds of folks. But what we can do is encourage this person, that person. If we get 1,000 small businesses that start up, hire just one person, that's 2,000 new jobs. Sprint's not going to bring in 2,000 new jobs. And if they do, in one swoop, they could be gone tomorrow. By having 1,000 new companies, 1,600 new companies, we can actually begin seeing Kansas. 75% of employees in Kansas work for companies less than 10 in size. We're talking mom and pop operations. Just this morning I was at a guy's house and he uses a sawmill in his backyard and he's making money, right, sawing down trees in Kansas. Mom and pop shops. If you take a look at 85% of our employees, they work for companies less than 100 in size. Right? The real strength of Kansas economy is the individual mom and pop shops. All right. And so what's really wrong with allowing people to keep their money anyway, right? I'd like everybody to be able to keep their money. All right. When we take a look at some of the facts, what's going on? For some reason. Sorry. We've also reduced property taxes. We've tried to make property taxes much more affordable. We've also put a cap on property taxes, right? Well, it's not going. We cap property taxes. If we take a look at what's happening economically, what you hear in the newspapers is that revenue is falling like crazy. We're not making up our revenue. Well, the reality is when you take a look at 14, and then you look at 15, we actually have more money coming in 15 and 16. Right now, currently, we got more money coming in today than we did a year ago, 2 years ago. And guess what? It's projected to be more in 17 as well. So why this? Well, because this is where it's projected to be, and this is where it is, but it's still more than yesterday. So is it really dropping? No, the reality is revenues are going up. If we take a look at last April, fiscal year to date, tax revenues came in at 4.17. That's just this April. But a year ago, it was at 3.9. That's $73 million more, or 1.85% greater than the previous year's April revenue years. March receipts, guess what? Higher this last year in March than last year. That's an 8.62% increase. I'll take that. That's a good rate of return. We're actually growing our economy. Individual income taxes were up by almost 5%. Even though we gave all these great reductions, 3 or 4 years later, guess what? We've got more money coming in than we did the previous 2 years. And we're seeing individual income taxes, even with giving all these people a free ride, all these people, you know who else gets a free ride? All Kansas retirees on capers. No income tax. You know, so it's not just the quote rich guys, the big businesses, and they're actually small businesses that are getting quote a free ride. They're not getting a free ride, by the way. When you pay your personal property taxes on your home, it's about 11%, right? What do we charge business owners? Property tax. 25%. Well, is that fair that we charge them 25 when you and I get by with only 11? I mean, the reality is there's all kinds of discrepancies in the tax code, and we're trying to stimulate the economy. And are we doing it? Well, March sales taxes were up 3.4%. And when you take a look at not sales tax, what we call in-kind usage tax, or when somebody buys stuff from out of state, guess what? It was up 11%. I'll take 11% increase, right? It's not all bad news. Yes, there are some areas like oil and gas, 50% reduction. But in spite of the fact that oil and gas is down by 50%, we're still seeing better revenue today than we did 2 years ago. And you can see that on these reports in my deal. This is actually consensus revenue for April. You can see that 14, we were at 5.6, went to 5.9. We're still going to increase in 16, and 17 is even higher. Is revenue falling like crazy? I don't think so. The real differential is this is the projection, and this is where we're at, and that's what's causing the commotion, particularly when, guess what? You give agencies the capacity to spend more than we even project coming in. Right? That's the challenge. So Steve said, well, why is that happening? Maybe Ty will give us that answer. He's probably better. But the reality is we don't have the political will, the political backbone to make the cuts. A year ago, we said we'd come up with an efficiency study. Anyway, this efficiency study was going to come up with some money, and then next year, this year, we were going to use that efficiency study to actually cut spending. And we did cut spending. We were trying to use some of those things. But bottom line, we have not got the political will to say no. That's the real challenge. Spending is still out of control. And then people say, well, you're cutting schools. The word on the street is that you're cutting schools. No, we're not.
We all understand that. Nobody else seems
right?
to.
I mean, yeah, here's where Brownback comes to town. That was Parkinson. Here's Brownback's first budget. It's higher than the previous year. Every year thereafter. And if you start taking out some of the other pictures, which I have, but for some reason they didn't show up, you'll see that even if you took capital gain or capital improvements and you take capers out, bottom line, still an increase. So that's good news. I like being the fourth in the nation who uses their SGF, their state general fund. We're the fourth in the nation on spending, school spending. Fourth in the nation as a percentage of what we put aside and give to our K through 12. It is a huge priority. It's actually about what, 50, 52%, maybe more. I don't know what percent of our budget time. K-3, yeah, about 50% maybe so. Yeah. It's the majority. And on top of that, we've got other things. We, over the last 4 years, have increased vocational training. We're paying kids in high school, juniors and seniors, to get 4 different certificatable programs where they can go to tech school, they can graduate as a welder, they can graduate as a nurse assistant, they can graduate with, 300 and some odd different certificates, and when they graduate from high school, they are job ready. Job ready, and we pay 100% of that. 100% for 4 different certificatable programs. So, you ask the kid, like my son got his, you'll find college grads, they're working, They get their job and they're making 25,000, 40,000. You take a look at what's going on the front line, in the hangars. Some of these guys are making 50, 60, 70. They never even graduated from college. And guess what? They're still making good bucks. And that's the word that needs to get on the street. You can be very successful in Kansas starting your own business. You don't have to have a college degree. And if you're ready for college, great. But less than 15% of our folks need to be college graduates, of our workers. So we went through this efficiency study, and guess what? We found how much? $2 billion of potential savings if we're willing to just chomp and bite the bullet and do it. There's plenty of ways to make Kansas more efficient, and this study proves it. We spent about $3 million to come up with $2 billion. That's a pretty good rate of return. Spent $3 million to come up with $2 billion in potential savings. The question is whether we will have the political willpower, and you know this very well. Well, there are ways to save money. The challenge is, can you get 63 Republicans in the House or so and 22 in the Senate to actually agree that we're willing to make those cuts and those changes? All right. If you really want to know what's going on in the legislature, if you go to our legislative website and spend a little time there, I showed you where you can go. Over here in the right-hand corner, they actually have summaries of every bill. The good news is we only had about 125 bills that passed both chambers. That is good news. Out of 1,000 or so, 1,500 ideas, we said, you know what? We're only going to deal with about 125. When the legislature's in town, we're all in trouble. Our pocketbooks are in trouble, right? So this is actually good news. But if you want to know exactly what we did, you can go then to this website. And over there on the left-hand side, you can pull up the research department. And then you can get this particular deal. And off to the right-hand side, you can pull up these summaries. And I'll show you one. This is summary number 2 out of 3 volumes. So they produced some at the beginning of the session, a little bit more, and they're going to have a wrap up here shortly if they haven't done it already. And inside there, you're going to get a summary of everything that we did topically. So we had an idea called concealed carry. And inside that bill, you know it's only got one bill number, right? 2502. So we had actually 5 concepts, 5 different bills wrapped up into this one bill, right? Had to deal with air guns in Derby. Derby School District said we don't want to have BB guns on campus. We have a no gun tolerance thing. We're not going to teach BB gun and gun safety courses anymore. Legislature says, no, you're a public entity. You will continue to allow these nonprofit organizations to teach our youngsters how to handle guns safely. We also dealt with active duty military, so they could get their concealed carry licenses much faster and along with their spouses. We wrapped another idea in there, public buildings. We want to make sure that the public can go into public buildings, right, and still carry. That you're not the threat. Well, then there's also employees. We wrap that into there. Restricted access badges so people that get into the courthouses can have their access faster and get in and out faster. Anyway, it's not uncommon for us to have 4 or 5, sometimes 8 or 10 concepts wrapped into one bill towards, and we call these conference committee reports. And you can find out what we do topically by going to the website, downloading this, and getting a great summary. Notice this last word. If you want to take my gun away and disarm me, you must provide armed security. That's one of the changes we made this year. That if you're going to take our weapons away, you have to provide security. Armed security, not just security, but we added the word armed security. All right, so there's a great summary of various things that are going on in the Capitol. I'll talk a little about the efficiency studies. Some people are concerned about KDOT. We can talk about KDOT. We keep, quote, robbing KDOT, but the reality is there have been surpluses for years because we're pumping too much money into that system. There's not one project that has not been completed yet today. Major maintenance projects are continuing as planned. Current projects are being finished out. They do have 23 projects that they're slowing down on. On paper, they're saying, you know, if we have to make some cuts, here's what we would stop. Well, the reality is, do we really, I mean, some of these projects are great and we need them, but do we really need to have an interchange right here, a brand new interchange? I mean, is traffic going to be that much better off because of what's going on the east side of town, on Kellogg? Does it really need to be extended another 3 or 4? Can we put that on hold for a couple of years? I mean, if we had to, bottom line, the answer is yes. There are a lot of projects that are great and they're wonderful. Are they absolutely essential? Probably not. So when you're in a tight bind and you're making a prioritize between educating our kids and having a, quote, 30-second faster turn over here at Kellogg and 135, you know, they improve those on-ramps and off-ramps. Was that essential? Does it really make life that much better? I doubt it. All right, so can we do better? I think so. You know, are we robbing KDOT? Yeah, we are. The real problem for me with KDOT is that we still got 30-year bonds and 20-year bonds, and some bonds that are out there from 3 KDOTs before, 3 projects, right? And so many times we're actually going deeper into debt, and that's the problem I have, is that we're not cutting spending and we're not getting out of debt. As Republicans, we're pro-business. We're for smaller government, right? We're for lower taxes. Well, I want us to continue to be the party that recognizes that we're for smaller government, lower taxes. So what did we do? We added a surcharge. Here's one of the problems. We added a surcharge, House Bill 2696. It's going to cost the taxpayers about $10 million annually. It's only $3.25 when you go register your car. But we already have a $4 surcharge. So now it's $7.25. And that $4 surcharge is supposed to drop off a couple years ago, right? So one of the challenges, we just love fees. They say, well, we're not raising taxes. Well, it's just another form of a tax. We did the same thing with skilled nursing care. Whether you have the bed occupied or not occupied, guess what? That company, that nonprofit in most cases, nursing center, is going to be paying a bed tax. Well, why do they want that bed tax? Well, because then for this $3 or $4, it was actually $5.25, we can then pull down $10 from the feds. Well, that's okay at some level. We get more money on the state side, right? But who pays federal taxes?
We do.
We all do. So guess what we just did? We raised taxes. Those are the kinds of things that we have to really watch out for. And if you're looking for somebody that's going to represent you, you need to ask them, how do you feel about fees? Are you willing to vote down fees? The majority of my colleagues will consistently vote for fee increases, right? And the reality is that's just a backdoor tax. All right, I know that these guys got some other things to share. I appreciate the opportunity to share quickly.
And I didn't even have to stand up and grab you.
All right,
Okay.
good. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Ty or Mike, whichever, flip a coin or decide among yourselves there.
Mike Petersen, I'll let Ty, he's the one that's on the schedule, but just want to let you know a little bit to follow up on Pete on some of the KDOT issues. One of the things that they're doing is they pulled back on preservation. They realized that they've been doing 1,200 miles of preservation for a year, but nobody ever took the time to decide, is that the right amount that we should be doing? There's newer technologies out, and the way they use the angled rocks and the chemicals that they put in their sealants, some of them can last a lot longer. So they need to take a step back, take a look, and see how many miles they really need to do. They put off some preservation, making sure that it didn't drop the quality of the roads. They're still going to do 200 and some miles because those roads desperately needed it. They're looking at how we can do that, how we can do it more efficiently and in a better method. They're looking at some of the projects and they're prioritizing some of them by safety. What is going to be the, what is the true traffic analysis? Is the traffic going to grow there? Is it cheaper right now to do it? But when you're tight on money, you have to look at a lot of different things and see how you do that. People are saying, oh, they've robbed KDOT, the bridges are going to crumble. Well, most of the bridges that are bad in our state are underneath the city and county. There was no reduction to the city and county matching funds for that because we understand that the bridges that are in trouble are a lot of the smaller ones, and that's where they need to go. There's reasoning behind this. There's a lot of thought that's went into it, but they didn't cut that. When we left, KDOT was still going to spend more this year than last year, even with all the money that's been taken out of it. A lot of people do not realize that, but when you look at the numbers, sometimes it tells a little different story. Some of the efficiency study, the $2 billion, there's probably $100 million of that may not actually happen or be able to happen because there's some things that were unique to Kansas that they didn't take into factor in the study. But that's still a whale of a return when you spend $3 million and you're getting, close to $2 billion back. I mean, I'll take that all day long. There was a lot of look. It generated, the study didn't just do what the study said, but it generated a lot of other discussion into other things. Senator Masterson and myself on the last 4 years at least have been trying to get KDOT and some of the state to look at what property they actually owned and if they could sell some of their excess property. Sometimes these interchanges, they took the whole tract, that was the easiest way for them to get what the property that they needed and fairest to the farmer. Well now, they may have only used 5 acres of that 20 acres they took. Well, the rest of this is off the tax rolls. Some of it we're actually paying to maintain and mow. Other ones, they've kind of just fenced around and the farmer's getting them all for free. Well, we need to sell those properties and get them back on the tax rolls. Had a situation down here off the river trying to sell some property. The state's finally getting into doing it. They went out for the bids, a couple of people bidding on it, decided that they knew that it needed to be 2/3 of the appraised value, or the state can't sell it. The state decided not to accept the bid. They said because the right-of-way was acquired on a federal program, that they had to take a minimum of appraised value or the state couldn't sell it. Well, nobody had ever thought to ask if there was a process issue to get a waiver on that property. The city came out and said there was gonna be no more access to it, so now you're limited. It's really only worth something to 3 or 4 different businesses there along the area. The gentleman who'd only been in the job for a year and a half looking at dealing with property said, I'll find out if we need a waiver. I said, well, let me know. He had a good meeting with the Federal Highway Administration. They came back again and said, yes, we have a waiver process. Here's some of the criteria. They were able to get that property, get it sold, and now it's back on our property tax rolls, which is helping out our local areas. Pete already talked about, schools. We voted for a budget. Some things in that budget I didn't like either, but it was a budget that felt harmless to schools. We're dealing with the courts. We have a Supreme Court that's doing some things that are challenging. And so, we're gonna really need to look at our retention vote when we come up on the Supreme Court. Look at some of these cases, because some of them are costing Kansas citizens quite a bit of money. But with that, Senator Masterson worked very hard on coordinating a lot of folks, and he has a great presentation on the budget. At the end, when everybody's done, be happy to stand for some questions. Thank you.
Senator, would you come on up front here? We'll give you a spot. Worked out better for the TV than the cameras in the back.
Actually, I plan to keep it kind of short because I'd rather
That's fine.
answer questions.
That's fine. Yeah.
And we can get as deep a detail as you want. First, I just want to say thank you, because it's you guys that take the time to see through the agenda that comes out of the echo chamber of the newspapers and the blogosphere, and it's just astounding to me, the things that you see echo in that crowd and the perception they're trying to create, the confusion between who is Kansas? They're telling you Kansas is in bad shape. The disconnect is they're trying to point to the Kansas government, which in my perspective should get smaller, versus the Kansas people. And they want you to confuse the two, and they just fill us with all these misperceptions. Pete did a great job talking about some of the good news that's out there with Kansas. But the political environment right now is toxic. When you go to a general population lunch and learn, the questions start with, because of this, why'd you do that? And you can't even get back, well, can we talk about this? Because this is not accurate. And if you can understand this, I can tell you why that. But you get to liar. I don't believe you. Because the echo chamber of the papers and the social media is taking us all off track. So I want to start with thank you for taking the time to see through that. Because general population does not. And they move with emotion. And it's angry and it's toxic. And you can tell the tension that we're putting on them. The truth is, I know Sam was elected in 2010. The Senate didn't change over until 2012. So you think about it, we're not even 4 years out from a change in control at the government level. We're just now really understanding, myself included, the time there to figure out which rocks to flip over. And every time you flip one over, you're going, holy cow, how does this go on? Because government's embedded in government so deep. I call them the weebies. We'll go about it, because we be here when you're gone. Right? Yeah. The elections change people over, but the bureaucracy underneath you is embedded in what they do. And there's so many decisions made outside of your representative. And for those of us from a more conservative, small government hill, have not had the ability to even flip the rocks in Kansas for a tremendous amount of time. So I just want to thank you for your help. Anything you can do to get that team reelected, the better, because these things are really huge deceptions. School funding still increasing, record spending this year. We have surpassed $4 billion with a B dollars into K-12. You hear about this 1992 formula and this devastation. They actually played the KRA did an April Fool's on me and mentioned me personally. So on April 1st, their newsletter said, in this big surprise, Chairman of Ways and Means introduced a bill that had education funding keeping up with inflation and enrollment since 1992. I read that and I thought, Interesting. I pulled every single dollar we spent in 1992. I found a $500 scholarship. Count it. Now give me my enrollment increases, give me my inflation. We outpaced that by $500 million annually in education. Inflation and enrollment, we have well exceeded that. So there's public education. There's things we need to change there to make this. It's not about the kids is the problem. It's not about the kids anymore. It's about this. It's about the system. Because if we can get to the kids, we can't even get to that conversation. What does it really cost to get the results we want with our children? And that's the most important thing. Transportation. Complete fabricate. Yes, we have reduced our transportation. We got so used to high levels of transportation spending. Like Mike was saying, 1,200 miles. We were basically on a schedule to repave every mile in the state every 7 years.
Whether it needed it or not.
Whether it needed it or not. That's that nobody really evaluated, is that the right amount? But we had that kind of money coming in because roads are important to Kansas, and that's okay. But people don't understand. Transportation takes in over $1 billion of dedicated revenue just from the registration, fuel taxes, and none of that money can be taxed. So we're talking about sales tax money, general use sales tax money that in the history has been demand transferred over there. It's really an account. The structural issues with Kansas government right now are primarily accounting issues. It's not stealing. It's general sales tax money that's being demand transferred, so you don't count it in your collection, and then when you use it, it's robbing, and we're out of balance. You could literally just take the sales tax money and account for it properly, and Kansas would be structurally imbalanced. But it's not how you see it on the news. Capers, the public retirement system. No administration prior to this has, Sam, I think this might be one of his regrets, actually. The amount of time and effort and money they put into supporting the Capers system. If we had just kicked the can, like every other administration prior to him, we'd have excess revenues.
Capers wouldn't be better, but we'd have excess.
Capers wouldn't be better. Capers would still be in the toilet. He took that upon himself to shore up this system. The average, in effect what we did, we passed legislation. I can't remember now what year it was we did that. It was reform. Was that 2012 or
12 or 13.
12 or 13. Basically what it did is it changed our structure to where we were going to make excess payments, kind of like additional principal on your mortgage, if you will, because we had this unfunded liability. So we pay almost double, $400 million a year, shoring this up. Prior administrations, less than 200. And so this delay in Capers was a reduction in that extra payment. We're still spending $365 million this year shoring up Capers, where prior administrations were spending $200. Building that up. So we did take into account the Capers system, and those are our big drivers. It's amazing to me that we have kept growth in government down to 1.6, 1.8%, when you've got double-digit growth in things like Medicaid, Capers, and K-12. Those are the only two areas actually that have not been cut. Medicaid for the first time this year has had a cut. But what I call the echo chamber is trying to get you convinced that this state is in dire, dire trouble, and you must make an emotional shift with who's in control. They want to kick everybody out, right? Well, they don't kick the conservatives, really. But don't buy into it. There's a different story, and I don't know how we fix it at this point, other than groups like you guys that actually take the time to go look. I don't know how you beat the echo chamber, because you walk down the street and 8 out of 10 people seem to think that we're in these dire straits, and that schools have been destroyed, and retirees aren't going to get their checks, and our bridges are going to fall down, because that's what they want you to do. That might have been a little farther than you wanted, Mark.
No, that's great. Well, let's give all three of them a hand for their and we are going to open it for questions now. If you have a question, go ahead and stay up here. And actually, Mike, would you like to come up here as well? It makes it easier for the people with the cameras as well. And then if you have the question that you would like all three to answer, you can leave it at that with all three. If you have a question for a specific legislator, then just let us know which one that would be.
Yes, you alluded to the problem is the bureaucrats. What are we doing to try to get that corrected?
Well, the bureaucrat thing, the bureaucrat thing takes time, right? Because you've got a heavily classified staff there it's hard to turn over. And it's hard to know who and when to drill down in these agencies to get to, and that just takes time. And that's why there's such a push to remove those that are trying to shrink. The truth is, even though work participation rates are up and unemployment is down, Kansas's government footprint has shrunk. We've been successful at that, but when you're on the shrink side of it, it's painful. So there's a resistance to shrinking government. And I actually, to be quite honest, it was more of a resistance than I anticipated. I was a believer in starve the beast, force it to shrink. Problem is now we have this burn the house down mentality going on that Pete alluded to. Nobody wants to vote for anything. You don't want to vote for tax. You don't want to vote for spending. Everybody steps out and they're just trying to melt the place down so you'll get this emotional response. But the truth is we need to find a way to, and I'm not sure what the answer is, somehow kind of term limit bureaucrats, if you will, because I've learned that they're the ones that have control as these legislative bodies turn over. It's embedded in the system.
Why can't you just eliminate some departments and create a new one?
Yeah, we've actually here recently done some of that. And some authorities that, we do these quasi-government things like the Kansas Bioscience Authority, which became a disaster, and the state trying to get into investment in business. And then KETA, the Transmission Authority, got rid of it. And there's other authorities out there. These quasi-governments that take taxpayer money, but they're separated and don't have to answer for it. And we've got to get rid of those too. You're absolutely right. The footprint needs to shrink. Limited government isn't just about less money. It's limiting it to those functions it should do. And we're well outside of that.
Art, you're next. Or did you want to say something, Mike?
Just briefly?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
We are looking at some different types of budgeting. We're looking at some performance-based budgeting as we look at these agencies and trying to see what they're actually doing and let them come back. That's some of the issue. Some of our agencies, we found out as we start looking into them, we're taking one-time money, like for a new computer system, and they roll that money over into their base budget for the next year. And those are fairly substantial amounts. So we're having to go through and take all that time and get it. I would love to see that we could pick a few agencies and go to zero-based budgeting, just a small agency at a time, and have some folks focus in on one agency at a time and start going through. It'd just be chipping away, but it would send a great message to some others. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, let's leave it at that. If you guys want to respond to the question, you go ahead if it's open. If they specify, of course, then we're going to go to the specified person. But if it's open, then if you want to respond, you go right ahead. If not, we'll just go to the next one. Art, you're number 2.
What is the best way to get voters across the entire state more aware of the exorbitant salary levels of some of the school districts, staff and teachers?
Yeah, one of the slides I presented was the Kansas Policy Institute has a new website called OpenGov, I think. Kansas OpenGov. Anyway, yeah, and they've got a place there that you can just take a look at various expenses. And I'd encourage you to go there. KPI does a great job but getting people to get onto the website, know how to manipulate which clicks to click to get that information. So we really just need to do a better job educating each other. The information's out there in the web today. I think even one of the news records that if you put in a person's name, you can find out exactly how much they get paid. Right, or you put in a job position, you can find out how much they get paid. So the information's on the internet today. We just need to get a better job educating each other on how to access it.
I would echo that, because there is an agenda to squash that, and you can't. So we send in press releases, they don't get published. Send in an answer, they don't get published. And then you'll explain something to a reporter, and they'll take 2 lines out that leave a false perception. It really does come down to, that's my greatest frustration, quite frankly. You'll go and explain this, and the thing that they take out of it is some soundbite that is meaningless. The soundbite that would come out of this room would immediately be that I said we cut transportation. If everything we said, they would say, Chairman says we cut transportation. That's my experience. I'll tell you, what they did to me this year, gaggle of reporters were walking down the street to go to a caucus. and one of them runs up to me, odd, you know, that he's running, stops me. The other takes a picture. I don't understand what's going on. Silly question, but I answer it. Picture the next day, he had stopped me by a for sale sign on the sidewalk. And you know, the paper, they published a picture of me with a for sale sign. And so a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So I tell, and I confront the guy, I go, that was low ball even for you. And they say, well, we don't crop pictures. So I've seen this one, and I've never seen the camera quite that close. So I know you crop pictures, but there's an agenda out there to leave a certain perception. So it is incumbent upon those that care to share. If you guys are on social media with your own circles of influence, I think we're at the point, just like convention of states, the federal government's out of control until the states take it back. It isn't going to change. Same thing's true here. Until we rise up and educate our friends, they rule the day.
Yeah, if I could add to that, this thought about being informed and helping others get informed. The issue with right now is the bathroom transgender issue. Bottom line, I've got maybe 4 or 5 emails from a conservative friend saying that this is an issue to them. I think it's a huge issue. But we've got to become you can't just presume that I'm going to vote right. And if you know where I stand on issue, I still need your email telling me to vote right, because I need to be able to tell my colleagues, I just got 100 emails on this subject, and they're all saying do this or do this. We need your involvement. You've got to become politically active. You've got to get engaged. And even if your representative is the kind of guy that you can trust 100% of the time to do what you think is right, still let him know what you think is right. It's just so important that we get ourselves motivated to type a few emails and get them out the door. We've got to get active.
I just want to add on to that one little thing real quick. If you are advocating for your positions, and we do need those emails, but don't send them to 10 or 20 people all at once. Try and send them individual so they don't get caught up in spam filters or rules that are coming in and out of the Capitol on traffic. For something important, if it's important personally to you, just take the time and fire them off individually. It works much better. Most folks will get them a lot sooner and a lot quicker.
And if you identify yourself as a constituent, that's helpful, because you mow through hundreds and hundreds of emails, and those, I mean, our office gal, bless her heart, we averaged 100 visitors a day this session in my office, plus the emails. Her whole job was just, I have her focus on find out if they're from South Central Kansas, my district if possible, so they're looking for those ones that you truly represent up there.
If I can cheat here, I had that question written down in a little bit different way, and maybe we can make quick work of my specifics on this. In about 2006, there was a piece of paper floating around, I think Bob Weeks either had it or he might have come up with it, comparing the amount of money that back then we had Boeing, a Boeing buyer was handling and managing that amount of money versus what a superintendent or a superintendent's vice at some of the USD 259 schools. The wages that some of these people are getting, it was in some cases almost twice or almost triple, and in many cases twice as much for handling the same amount of money. In other words, we're overpaying administrators in schools, grossly overpaying them. And yet we keep hearing that we don't have enough money in schools. Can't the legislature do something about how much we're paying? You hear about nepotism going on and people that are in a position that may not even need to be staffed at all. And here we could be paying $150,000 or $200,000 a year for a position in a school district that position could easily be held by someone with a $40,000 a year wage.
Right. Some of them should be held by people with business degrees instead of education.
Right. Can the legislature do anything about it?
Here's your biggest conundrum, right? We like local control. So this is one of the biggest problems with education finance. The state blocks money. Even in the old formula. The formula just developed a number, but the number got spent to the school district. And that is what then, those are local board decisions. You know what the most egregious? Blue Valley, their super the year before he retired, $650,000.
Oh my gosh, I hadn't heard that.
Because he was $350 base salary, and they gave him $300 in deferred compensation, which spiked his capers almost $40,000 a year. $650,000 for one superintendent in a school with 20,000 kids.
And it's local control.
And it's local control. There's nothing you can do. So there's your pendulum. If you want the legislature to take care of it, it has to take that local control and make those decisions for them, which is interesting. I went to the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court, and I can tell these guys, save for one, and he knows just enough to be trouble, they don't really understand the formula themselves. It was very interesting to me. But one question was from Justice Rosen was, well, if the legislature sets this provision to the locals and they don't avail themselves of it, has the legislature provided suitably? Roop, there, the guy suing us all, says, of course not. He goes, well, that's my point. Right? So we could actually set provision in place as a state, but if the locals choose no, we haven't done our job in their mindset. So the only thing you can do then is take their control.
Is there any, are you done with your question, or is it the same question?
Same question, basically.
Go ahead.
Is there any way that there can be something such as a legislative post-audit that blow out this information to everybody to see what is inside of the school district's various budgets?
It's actually out there and readily available. It's just nobody reports on it. It is actually, you could go right now and find the salary of every superintendent.
And we've also done audits on their spending and on how they're efficient and whether they're efficient, and come up with suggestions on a way they can be more efficient. I remember my first year in legislature, Derby actually volunteered to go through this post-audit study. And they came up with, they were hoping to come up with like 500 to 1,000. They came up with $1 million, 5 years of $1 million. And they could even come up with $1.5 million the first year in efficiency studies. So the information's there. The problem is the locals are not reading the information that our post-audit folks are being paid to provide, and we provide it. We do a big school, a middle school, size school, and a small school district every year do a post-audit study. And year after year, time after time, audit after audit, there's ways that they can be far more efficient.
Very good. Walter, I'm going to take you next, but we have a question here in the very back of the room. Go ahead.
Along the lines of the agency abuses and bureaucrats, one of my biggest issues I've had is trying to figure out a way that there could be any legislative oversight over some of the mostly autonomous agencies out there. And through my research, I have not found a single statute that allows any of you guys that we elect to go into a state agency with any authority or any other controlling, binding action to tell them that they're doing something wrong or to make staffing changes or otherwise. How do you get around that? Are you guys making any actions?
Well, as individuals, we don't have power from that perspective, and right, that's both good and bad. It's good. It's good in the sense you can't have somebody corrupt, abusing their authority as an elected person. We move as bodies of consensus, but then the power of the legislature then the statute is what then would rule. Oh, and then your chief executive.
Well, let me qualify that. There's a lot of people that are in my situation, constituents, business owners or otherwise, that will go to an elected person and say, hey, what can I do? And the elected person says, I can't do anything. And if they're government, you can't sue them. What do you do?
Well, we can't do anything maybe individually, as Senator Masterson says, but we can do something corporately. So if we'll talk amongst ourselves, we can introduce a bill or we can ask for a post-audit study. And so we have a post-audit group that periodically prioritizes the things that we want to audit. And our auditors have the authority to go in and dig deep and even go beyond what most agencies even gather their own selves. So we've got some great post-audit auditors that do an outstanding job. The challenge is most of the stuff they do, most legislators never read what they do, and we don't implement what they do. And so we've got to do a better job holding our legislators' feet to the fire and say, look, you just paid $3 million for this audit, this study on efficiencies. You just had a post-audit study done. We want you to vote in accordance with that efficiency report.
Going on too, on the executive side and agencies, that's what's key about having a good governor and appointments and good heads of agencies, because this is getting back to the bureaucrats. Right? It takes a while to get in there to figure out who's good, who's bad, who's lying, who's honest, and it leaves the system corrupted. You have to have some time pass of a decent person managing that entity.
I'll give you that, but what happens when the governor has no authority to intervene or do otherwise as well? I mean,
well, the governor does have authority at the agency level. The governor has unilateral authority.
But at the same time, I checked into this for 10 years now, and the governor really has no authority to control what an agency does other than through the appointment process. So I don't know. I was hoping that there was going to be some way that we could get a legislative oversight panel of some sort that can be convened if there's ever a gross issue to investigate.
We had a court of tax appeals, and they call themselves a court, and that was changed by the legislature. We moved them back to a board of tax appeals, and then just recently we passed either more guidance to saying that, guess what, if you don't like the direction this thing's going, you want to go to a court system, a true court, you have the option to do that. And right now we're trying to discuss whether or not we're going to override the governor's veto. That was one provision of about 5 in a particular bill that passed, right? So we're going to go back here on the 1st and probably decide whether we're going to try to override and preserve that aspect of that particular bill, along with other parts of the bill. And so at some level we are changing the way these organizations are structured. I remember when I first came, we had an organization called SRS. It no longer exists, right? Brownback came in and tried to make some major changes in the way we deal with children and seniors and disabled, because we were doing a bad job of the state. And so he mixed that all up and said, hey, we're going to have different organizations. We now have a Department of KDAS. And he got to put his primary person into that agency head. And the whole goal really was to try to change the makeup and the way it functions. So I think if there's enough complaints and enough concern, enough accountability, legislators as a group can do the job.
Walter, your question next.
Well, you guys are leaders of trying to make a difference. I think we're coming. One of the problems that I've seen is unfunded cash. We've got over $1 billion in schools. They have already collected in their bank accounts. I understand it's about $5 billion in various agencies. In the ballpark, about $6 billion total of unencumbered cash.
I wouldn't say unencumbered, not inside the agencies. The schools have the largest portion of unencumbered cash, and it's outside of the state system.
So
now there's a pooled money investment that actually manages cash balances for cash flow, but a lot of that is encumbered.
Okay, so the question is, we have a spending problem in Kansas, not a revenue problem. That's true. Keep spending more, we bring in, we continue to raise the amount of revenue. The other part of the equation is how much is already in the bank accounts. Why isn't that part of the solution? And you have, as a legislator, the power over the purse. What do you suggest is the best way to get that money as part of the solution, rather than just say, well, that's theirs to spend?
Well, part of the challenge is when you give your child an allowance and they've got it in their cookie jar and you run short on your electric bill, you'd like to get into their piggy bank and take that money back from your child, right? In essence, the school system has been given the money. And it's hard for us to go back in and say, take it out of your piggy bank, we want to go spend it over here. It's really not ours to spend anymore. We keep giving the judicial branch money. They give it to another agency for the purposes of helping attorneys that are struggling, maybe with drug abuse, or, anyway, they've got some problems going on, disciplinary issues. So there's about $5 million in this cookie jar that just keeps growing in size. We told the Supreme Court, we want you to start spending that money. Well, the agencies are very resistant to actually spending money that we've already given them.
Very resistant. Too bad. Their appropriation next year is less. They've got the money to make up the difference. You have the power. Did you ever when we did this 2 years ago with the courts? Yeah, one second. Just a second.
No, I just said that on the school district side is where that money is in the cookie jar. They have to disconnect local control. That doesn't exist as much at the agency level. That money that sits there is primarily encumbered, but it is used for cash flow. You hear about a certificate of indebtedness internal. That's leveraging that balance of cash for cash flow purposes. But in the end, it's not cash that can be pulled and spent at the agency level.
The question is, how much is enough? How much do they need to operate?
Well,
There's a difference.
you don't have any argument here on.
Yeah. So how do you tap that difference?
If we had unilateral control, Kansas's footprint would be even smaller than it is. But we're bodies of consensus, and this is something that's even myself before I got in and figured out how it really all works. You don't really understand. But for example, think of a bell curve, and the top of the curve is my majority vote: 21 in the Senate, 63 in the House, and so you have to have this group, and something does have to pass for a budget. So I got my fringes here. For example, if someone on my conservative side right, takes themselves out of the conversation, that moves that governing majority to the left.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because you have to, the majority has to find it, so it starts pulling it from the left. And so we have, even though we have a really good makeup, we have people that take themselves out of the conversation, and so the end result is pushing our conservative majority to the left. And so those decisions of bringing, so even the guy that believes in the cut, if he takes himself out of the conversation, he moves it the wrong direction.
Good analogy, good analogy. Jerry or Jim, did you have a question earlier? Did I see your hand? No? Okay, if not, Jim Hudson's next then. And then back there.
I have been observing this election this year, especially I think what's going to happen. And most of you know we've been living in a banana republic in the United States of America for a long time. It's showing up more and more every day. Now, we see some I can tell you, you fellas are up there, and you have a lot of them. I think we need to know who is voting for what. A list of the bills that pass, how they voted on, we can decide whether we need to do that. I'm going to name a guy. I work on the railroad somewhere, or there was a gentleman there who worked for me, one of the laziest devils I ever had to do with my life. So I just wake him up and remind him to get him to do anything. And his wife, congratulated judge, and she's done the election. He came back and told us, oh, all the goodies they get, all the money they get, all the things they get, all this money that takes a long time. I don't say you guys get it. He's a Democrat. He's not one.
Jim, be concise with your questions so that they can answer.
And I would like to see if we can get it, so that we can have this information available. The voters can see who's voting on what. Notice?
Well, that's a good question. Well, why isn't every vote a recorded vote?
Well, first of all, to answer your question, most votes that we take that are important, the final action votes are recorded. And so I've got like 600 or 700, even though we had 150 bills that got through, 125 bills, I probably have 600 recorded votes this last session. And you can go on the website, again, this legislative website, you can look up a bill, and for every bill, you can see exactly who voted, who abstained, who changed their vote, because they'll have a little asterisk by their name. You can see whether they're present, not present, whether they're excused. You can see every single vote that's a major action vote. Now, the question is, can we vote on everything that happens? Reality is, it takes a long time to register all these votes, and there's a lot of votes that are just unanimous, 100%, 100%. There's no question. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you just don't, I don't think you have to get a registered vote on.
Could it be done electronically, where it would just be,
We do.
without slowing you down any? Yeah, I
No,
would really
actually, the answer to that, Mark, unfortunately, is no. Because are you talking like at the committee level? In the chambers, it's possible. Finally, because those are recorded electronically. Especially the House, actually, the House has a button they push that automatically records them into the system. But the Senate, we have verbal votes, and it's the secretaries up at the table that actually record. What you said takes forever. I agree.
Yeah, it takes forever.
But so in the chambers they are recorded, but at the committee level, there are certain like pass out votes are recorded. There's recorded votes, but there's a lot of like amending and things that are just depending on, and people can ask to be recorded or divided. There is a process for that.
Good question and good answer. Did you want to add to that, Mike?
I'm good.
Good, okay.
Can I answer one other thought?
Hold on, Glenn Perdue is next.
Sure.
Go ahead.
With regards to the voting record, there are organizations that rate our voting record. For instance, KPI, again, they have a freedom index. And they have certain bills that they tell you why they rated that, how they rated it. Kansas for Life. Kansas for Life looks at our voting score and decides whether they're going to recommend us or not. The chamber does. I mean, in fact, the schools probably rate us and give us D's and F's, right?
But can I touch on that? So I actually am a huge fan of KPI. Right, the information they put out. But their freedom index last year was because of this burn the house down mentality. You had everybody just vote no on everything. So you had liberal Democrats getting a higher freedom index. And I was just like, then I was like, wow, how would anybody in the public, you look at this thing, we'd be in Alice in Wonderland. Everything's upside down.
That's right.
That's funny, I never thought that would be a problem. Glenn, go ahead with your question.
I think our state pays too much attention to federal agencies, gives them authority where they have no authority, and I think we need state notification saying no to federal agencies. For instance, the EPA was created in 1970 by executive order of President Nixon. It's my understanding the executive orders apply to federal employees only. So why does the EPA have any authority within our state other than with federal employees? I think our governor needs to say no, and our legislature needs to come behind him and support him.
My opinion is, and I don't know who to give fault to, is we have everything backwards now in our general concept of government. They don't see that. Ask these kids that are even at the college level. They see the federal government like a national government, right? There's the federal and the state and the local. That's not how this was designed. The state was the sovereign entity, and that was an entity of the states. That has been lost. I contend it's been lost since we've popularly elected our senators, because now you have nobody at the federal government representing the state as a sovereign entity. There's just two more congressmen, and so we never see them. We don't. I mean, and they're good guys, but we never see them. They don't have any real tie to the state's power. And I've learned in this process, the 10th Amendment is meaningless because the federal government has power and money. So we'll give you this money if you do that. And we say, okay, here, handcuff me, I'll take your strings and you give me your money. And we do it voluntarily.
We have an opportunity in the Kansas House and Senate to pass a resolution which actually called for an Article 5 convention of the states. We were about 5 votes short in the House. So the reality is, again, the consensus is not concerned about this. I think we need to be. I think there are many of us that are becoming more and more aware of the issue. But until your representatives are willing to vote on these issues and push the executive branch to take a stand, we can tell the Attorney General, sue on our behalf. We're not telling the Attorney General to do that. We can force the Attorney General's hand and say, as a legislature, we want you to do such and such on our behalf. But the reality is we're not doing it because we don't have the will yet to do it.
Glenn, just to comment on Ty's answer about the state and federal and it being upside down, that started right after the Civil War, during the Reconstruction. That's when that really took place, when we stopped being the United States small, not capital letters, and the states were the capital letter. Now it's, the federal government is above and the states are below. And that's when that happened. So we're looking at quite an old problem.
We are winning some of these issues, though. We are starting to take some of these issues on, and we're beginning to win them. So we just need to have more Glens out there encouraging their state reps to get on with it.
Okay, at this time I want to ask if there's, from the Salina media people, did you have any specific question for us? We'd certainly like to get yours answered before we have to move along. You have any question for any candidate? Go ahead.
I had a two-part question. One was about the school choice voucher program. I was going to ask about its status, how it was going along. And the second one was, I believe I read recently that the governor, through executive order, created a department to eliminate redundant bureaucracies and laws and programs. I was going to ask how that was going along, if you knew.
Anybody want to grab on that?
Well, when the governor first came to town, one of his concepts was the Office of Repealer, and that actually is still in play. We came up with 50 different bills that actually went through one of my House committees, General Government Budget, and we passed a lot of those, and actually we did repeal some things. But the reality is, most of those laws, and that was agency recommended, of things they didn't want to do. And so, unfortunately, we need to dig harder on that very issue. There is some redundancy, but trying to get, for instance, one of the concepts I came up with was that we have a banking commission, we've got a security guys, we've got the insurance, they're all doing consumer education. So I said, why don't we pull all that money together and just have one consumer education website? And guess what? We've got one today. And they're doing a great job working together. So some of that is happening, we just need to keep encouraging that effort.
The other side of the question, the school voucher piece or school choice, I was actually surprised it wasn't, I'm not on the education committee. I anticipated something to happen this year with that. It was talked about early on, and quite honestly, I don't know what happened to it. But we got to the end of the day, and there wasn't anything there. You have a different perspective from the house. I couldn't understand why something didn't come. Well, one of the big distractions that I think interrupted that, I still doesn't mean it shouldn't happen anyway, was the court interrupting with this equity decision. So we ended up being consumed with trying to answer this court order on equity, which ate up tremendous amounts of time that I know impeded that. I don't know if that's the sole reason, but I'm not sure why we weren't able to get something done on school choice today or this year, because I think it had the votes to get through.
All right, okay, go ahead, Cindy.
So we're looking into schools for our kids, and they're supposed to go to college. So the problem is, you were talking about transportation earlier. It's 1.86 miles, so we're less than the 2.5. Can you imagine these guys walking 1.86 miles? Is there a way to fix that? Is there a way to I don't drive.
That would be a local control. The state does not require them to do it under, was it 2.5?
Right.
I felt that same thing. My kids, when we were young, before we changed the way we did things, we were 2.05 miles away, or no, it was just under 1.95 miles. So, and we couldn't get it either. But that's a local decision at this point for them to.
What would I need to do? Would I need to talk to
the local school board? But I can tell you what they'll tell you. The state's not. It's our fault.
They're going to tell you. They're going to say. I'd like to maybe set up a program with just Asian parents.
Anyone else who has not already asked a question? Okay, if not, I have one more if you don't mind, even though I'm kind of cheating here because I already asked one. This is directed at Pete DeGraaf, but I would certainly like input from both of the senators. In your early talk, you alluded to an efficiency study that found, you said, lots of other areas that people don't want to, and you know, if there's other efficiencies out there, I would really be interested in knowing what those are and where can we cut? Because I think it's been repeated several times here this evening, we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So where would you cut? Where can we? And I'd like to really hear from all three.
Well, I wasn't on a committee that actually looked at that study, so I don't know in-depthly, but I can tell you there was one issue having to do with health insurance. A lot of our school districts, right, they have their own independent healthcare system. And I think there was a move in the study, and there were some decisions, there was some study done on this issue, and we actually have a post-audit going on right now. But a lot of the school districts said, you're not going to actually save any money for blah, blah, blah. So the efficiency study said, yes, you can have one policy. We already have a policy for state employees. Why not include schools? We did this a long time ago, I don't know, 16, maybe 20 years ago, for capers. We had a lot of independent retirement programs for schools across the state. We brought them under one umbrella. Same way with payroll. There's really no reason why we can't do all payroll centralized for the state at large. We send the money out, and then many times we bring it back for capers and other kinds. Why can't we do some consolidation, some upward administrative consolidation? Not we're talking about schools, not talking about actual buildings. We're just talking about the administrative side. I think that can be done. Whether or not we'll actually do it takes consensus.
I would just agree with Pete on that. So the A&M study, and actually that's a perfect example. The consolidation of the health benefit of the population of the schools clearly was a huge money saver if we could consolidate it. But there was no political will. The best we were able to do was to get a study done that would give us some ammunition next year to move forward was the best we could do. So for every item that said this would be a better way to do this, there was another side saying no, it's really not. And there just wasn't the political will to get to some of those things. Now some probably were not of the 2 billion number, which we understood that, right? I only needed a fraction of that to happen, but there were some other things that may or may not have been doable, if you will. But from my perspective, we spend too much money on K-12. We spend too much money on our supporting public art. But to change that, the political will is weak because of the emotion in the echo chamber. Those are the areas, because those are the truth is, all the other portions of the Kansas budget have been cut. I mean, there are areas we can eliminate. There's still places to go, but not the big numbers. The big numbers are in those big entitlements, if you will, which primary education capers Medicare.
Right, that's 50% of the budget you have to.
Oh, that's 80-some%, those three.
Right.
88,
Well,
maybe.
entitlements is 80%.
Entitlements is, yeah, 80.
One of the things we noticed through the study was, you know, as it started a year ago and coming forward, I had the opportunity in my committee to review a few of the transportation recommendations. And 3 of them, our agencies had already started, like how they manage their workflow on their equipment and things like that. You know, one of the recommendations was, you know, you have some equipment that's being utilized 2.5 hours a day on average. Well, when you looked into it, we dove in deeper, we realized some of those were tree shredders in rural areas that were being hauled out. The other recommendation they had was that we surplus some and rent and lease some other things. Our agency had already started doing that over the summer. They realized that there was some money there, and they're looking for savings too in some of them, where you've gotten some new people in there, and they're actually already implementing some of those provisions that came out in the study before it was actually publicly released in the study. Whether that came about from some of the interviews, when the people were talking about, you know, when they went in to interview the agencies and discuss with them, I'm sure a lot of the agencies asked them, well, what are you seeing in other states? You know, the A&M study they've done a couple other states, and so, you know, I'm sure that the department heads were asking for, seeing what others were doing, and they'd actually looked into some of it. So some of this was already starting to happen ahead of time, which is great. I mean, that's fantastic. But that's not the case with all the agencies.
Anytime we can eliminate waste, abuse, or fraud, I mean, we just really have to do that, and it's an ongoing job. That
There's
will
better
never
ways
be
of
a
doing
job that's
business. Like
finished.
transportation's been one good area where different technologies and overlays and things like that, where the maintenance doesn't have to maintain this level. And that's one area. You know, Mike's chairman of transportation.
Well, let's give these legislators a big round of applause. Thank you very much for an incredibly informing session here. We really appreciate it very much.